Hello everyone, this is Ben, and in today's video what I'm going to do is talk about how I got into Christian apologetics. Kind of try to tell the story, personal story, my story of that. This is a story I've told before, but I think I could do a better job now. Kind of like trying to think through things that happened, and like sometimes there's things that you add in that don't really need to be added in, and then there's things that like you don't put in that like that really was important, and I just kind of knew about it in my mind, but didn't think about the fact that like you need to tell that part or whatever. So I'm going to attempt to tell the story. Christian apologetics. So just to define some terminology here, apologetic comes from an older English word, apology. But the English word apology kind of grew to mean like apologizing or like saying you're sorry, which is not what it used to mean. So now we have this word apologetic, as a noun, like you can give someone your apologetic, whereas they used to just say your apology. But it actually comes from a much older Greek word. It's actually in the New Testament. And basically, it means like a persuasive logic. It's not super precise, but it's perfectly fine to say that that's what it means. So it means like you're trying to change someone's mind with your like reasoning and evidence and that kind of thing. So one way to think of it is like we actually try to. Well, it's kind of the whole 9 yards. Someone may criticize the Bible, and you may explain the Bible correctly. Then that's apologetics that kind of every Christian is probably engaged in that to some degree. And so that's apologetics that almost all Christians do. And that's probably the most common form of Christian apologetics. You also may give like evidence or like proofs for God's existence, evidence for the historical resurrection, evidence for the reliability of the Gospels or like books of the Bible that you can trust, that they're trustworthy sources of information, So that's what we do. So now that we got that out of the way, me personally, I never heard the gospel until 1994. When I was 13. That doesn't mean that I hadn't been in church. I had been in church all the time, and technically I had heard the gospel. But what I mean is I just never listened. I never listened in church until I was 13. I was in church all the time. My attitude towards church was, how long before this is over? Why couldn't I have stayed? I thought Saturday morning was great because you watch cartoons on Saturday morning, and then there were Sunday morning cartoons, but we had to turn the TV off and go to church. It was like the saddest thing ever to me. And it was just like some sort of form of punishment, and like the weekend is this awesome fun time that church comes in and ruins it in the morning on Sunday. It never crossed my mind to like take church seriously or listen to what they're talking about at church. Until I was 13, I got introduced to like youth ministry, I guess, for the first time ever, and I went to like a youth camp. And it was 1994, and we had the music, all the worship music. It wasn't the same hymns that we did at church. The songs they did, we literally did "Lean on Me," and we did, let's see, "Oh God, you are my God, I will ever praise you." So I remember that one. And "The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock. May the God of our salvation be exalted." And we did "Our God is an awesome God." And we did a lot of hand motions to like every song, There were tons of hand motions. And the music aspect of it really like blew me away. And then the preaching aspect of it, Tuesday night of that camp, the pastor came out and he preached a sermon. He talked about the Lion King movie a lot. Which was kind of weird. But that was a new movie at the time. He was actually preaching through the Lord's Prayer. He was like a former college football chaplain, or maybe was still a chaplain. But he preached the gospel message of Jesus Christ. And I heard it for the first time. And to put that in a simple way, the basic idea is that God created the world and created us and everything. And God's perfect, but we're all sinners and have messed up. And because of the evil things that everyone has done, everyone deserves to go to hell forever. And but God's Son, Jesus Christ, was punished in our place by dying on a cross 2,000 years ago. And if you believe that that's true, and you accept it as the truth, then it, like, the forgiveness through, or Jesus' sacrifice in your place, Jesus being punished in your place, applies to you, and you will not have to be punished for your sin, and then you can go to heaven. That's putting it in a bare bones, simple way, and putting it that way, I'm sure, raises lots of questions. But I heard the gospel, that message, for the first time in my life. I actually heard it that Tuesday night. I think it was a July 5th, 1994. It was a Tuesday, and that would be like, the first full week in July probably. But at any rate, I immediately said to myself, I was like, okay, I need to like make up my mind, like, what I think about, like, important questions like this. It immediately struck me that, like, I need to take questions like this seriously. I remember thinking about the whole situation quite a bit that night while that guy was preaching, and, like, it was hard to listen to him preach a lot of the time because it was just like things he was saying were like making me think about what he was saying, and I would have to think a lot about each little thing he said, but he would just go on to saying more things, But I was just very, like, is this true? Or if this isn't true, then what is true? And I remember it went through my mind, like, well, what do my parents think? What do they believe? And I immediately decided that, like, well, I can't really use that as a basis for anything that I believe. And the reason why, for me personally, is I just grown up in a situation where my parents, my mother and father, have been divorced since I was 4 years old, and they were very much in disagreement about a lot of things in life. They had very different perspectives. And so, like, if I go with what one parent says, then I've got another parent over here, and, the other parent says totally different, So, like, and it didn't matter, So for me, just growing up, just came very naturally to me to, like, you don't believe things just because your parents told you. That's just how I was. What I found out is, through as I got older, is that, like, research has shown that, like, most people will just believe something because parents and, whoever's a teacher in their life, maybe a pastor, or maybe just an older, like, uncle or grandpa or ma, or, like, teachers at school, or, like, anyone that's, like, older than them, and their friends too, but, we can just sum all that up and say parents and teachers. Most people believe what their parents and teachers tell them to believe. And a lot of times you have atheists who will say that that's, like, super irrational, but it's not really irrational. I mean, like, think about how much information we get from parents and teachers. If you're going to question that, then you're questioning our ability to justify our beliefs rationally on the basis of testimony of other humans. Like, we justify a lot of our beliefs on the basis of testimony. Like, when you look at the weather report, you're just taking the whoever's reporting that's their testimony, that's what's going to happen, or that's an accurately created weather report, right? We take testimony all the time, and especially from our parents and teachers. Like, I mean, your teachers teach you how to do math, and they teach you how to wait in line, and like they teach you all sorts of things, you know. And if we can't rely on testimony rationally, if it's not rational to rely on testimony, then we're all in a lot of trouble, you know. So I want to make this point right off the bat. I was not a testimony guy. I wasn't the kind of person that was going to take something based on testimony. But most people are. Most people believe because their parents and teachers believe, and that's why they believe a lot of the things they believe. That's where they get their morals, their whole view on life, including their religion. What sports they like, you know, like everything. And like that's not irrational because you're just going to the best sources of information you have, and you're relying on that, you know, for information, especially when you're younger. That's kind of like it's not irrational at all to believe something for those reasons. But for me personally, I was not the kind of person, because of my situation, it was just like, well, I can't do that. You know, because your parents are, generally speaking, the people you trust the most, the people you've relied on the most, who've taught you the most. And whatever I would get from one parent, I had another parent who I trusted just as much who would say something different. You know, so like it didn't matter which parent I picked, there was someone that would like counteract it, you know, and that was just my reality. And so I was just the kind of person who wasn't going to, I made a decision that night, I'm not going to accept anything about religious beliefs on the basis of testimony. And I thought to myself, and I realized that if God exists, then it would have to be the Christian God. You know, I realized that because, like, essentially my idea was, like, I realized if there's hope in life, it has to be this form of hope. Because, like, hope of salvation, you have to take sin and evil seriously. And, like, this is the only way to really take it seriously, where, like, you're going to go to hell for everything you do. But at the same time, forgiveness, God is totally good and forgiving and merciful. And that's the only God that really makes sense. And I realized that. And then so the question to me was like, okay, does God exist at all? And I don't know how I came to the conclusion that night, but somehow I just sort of knew that God exists. And so I was like, and I think the devil was whispering stuff in my ear. It was like there was this conversation in my mind, and it was like I could almost kind of not really hear voices, but thoughts kept popping in my head that didn't seem like they were coming from me. And at any rate, we'll move on past this part. I ended up accepting Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior that night and decided to believe it. So then, that was, you know, after my 7th grade year. I was 13. So then we move into my 8th grade year, which would be the 1994/95 school year. And all throughout the 8th grade year, I had to make a lot of changes in how I did things and how I saw things based on the fact that, like, I believe this Jesus stuff. Because, like, I really, you know, like, was doing my best to try to take it seriously, I guess. It wasn't something I just sort of grew up into. It was more like a conscious decision. And I struggled with a whole lot of, like, changes I had to make to sort of my morals, you know, the way, you know, bad things that I was doing that, like, I needed to stop doing, you know. And we won't talk about that because we could talk forever about that. But one question crept into my mind, like, how do I actually know that this gospel story of Jesus is actually true? And like it was like, how do you know it's true, Ben? And I was just like, I knew it was true when I was at the camp. That's what I said that whole year. I don't know how to say how I knew it was true. I just know that I know that I knew it was true. I knew, based on my memory, that back then I knew it was true. But I don't know how I now know it's true, other than just remember that my former self did have some reason, but I couldn't say what it was. That's what I thought, and that I just rode on that whole year. And then, like, I figured it must have been the music. Somehow the music spoke to me on some sort of spiritual level or something. It must have been the music, because the music was very much like a radical change from anything I was used to. So I went back to the camp the next year after 8th grade, and I thought, every time they're doing the music, I'm gonna, be super involved with the music, because, like, they always push you to do hand motions, and they pushed you to, like, stand up and clap for everything. If there was no hand motions, they wanted you to clap the whole song. We just clapped. If there were no hand motions, we were clapping the whole song. I remember there was this other kid I met at the camp, and he thought it was real funny because I couldn't clap to the beat. But, like, you would get over it, and you would sit down and, like, stop clapping, or, maybe you would sit down, or, like, kids would do that all the time. And then they would be like, come on, everybody, So, like, I thought to myself, okay, in this 95 year, I'm going to clap the whole time and stand up the whole time, and there's not going to be one song playing where I'm not super into the song, because I needed that, because I figured that must be how I knew it was true. And so I figured I need that reminder by going back to the camp and doing all of that, and it'll help me see, like, how I knew it was true. And I remember it got to the point where they were like these 3 young girls that just had this, like, music career that were just out there performing in the middle of the day, and it wasn't really part of, like, the main, hey everybody, let's get up and worship time. They were just they were just singing, and I was like, no, they're out there doing music, I'm going to stand up the whole time. And I was standing up, and I was like the only person in the room standing up. And I remember there was this random group of people. There was, like, girls, sounded like they were, like, behind me, and they just yelled, sit down, at me. And so, like, I sat down, and it was, I guess, like, I was just trying to do what I was trying to do, I'm sure nobody knew that was what was going through my head, but that why I was doing that. But, like, I remember very clearly when the camp was ending, and, like, the last little thing we did together at the camp, we had lunch, and then we went upstairs, me and 2 friends of mine, and they had some rolling chairs and, like, a hardwood floor, and we were just playing, we were having a good time rolling around on the rolling chairs. And I just remember, like, thinking, like, the camp's over, and nothing proved to me that the gospel is true. And I've got to leave this camp knowing that. And, like, the first year when I left, like, the music was so vital. I remember I could hear it in my ears all the way home. And I would sit there and, like, I would, like, close my eyes and try to listen and make sure I could still hear it. So this is where I was at 14. So then we move into my 9th grade year, the 95/96 year. And I get confronted with some new things. Now remember, I'd had a lot of moral struggles and had to make a lot of changes to how I lived my life in my 8th grade year. And the whole foundation, their whole rational justification for why I changed my morals was because the Bible said to do X, Y, and Z and not A, B, and C. And, like, it was very difficult, and a lot of people looked down on me because of the changes that I made. So it was very important to me that, like, the Bible actually true, and especially that, for me, that the gospel of Jesus Christ is actually true. Okay? So then I got confronted with a few things. In the course of that year, my uncle just kind of told everyone in the family that he doesn't believe in God, that he's an agnostic. And it was at Christmas time, if I remember right, and he wasn't going to go to church with everybody when we went to, like, a little Christmas church thing. And Grandma was, like, upset about it, And that was really interesting to me, that really struck me because, like, that was something that I was struggling with at the time. Because already before he even said that, I was already, like, thinking, like, how do I know it was true? You know, it was supposed to be the music, but it turned out the music didn't do it. So now I got nothing. I'm leaving the camp in 95 with nothing to rationally justify the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then here my uncle is, like, someone in my life just straight up saying, like, yeah, I don't believe it. He didn't say it to me, but, like, I had to hear about it over and over and over again from Grandma. She was just annoyed by that. Super annoyed. Well, then we roll around to the summer of 96 after my 9th grade year. And this year I didn't go to the camp. This year my mother was working with, like, a dance studio, and they had to do this, like, competition or something during the summer. And so she dropped me off with, like, the husband and sons of the woman that owned the dance studio. So the woman that owned the dance studio had this big family, and her husband was just keeping her sons that whole week. And so I just was going to stay with them and, you know, have fun with them. And here's the thing, they were all Mormons. So, like, I spent a week with Mormons in the middle of the summer instead of going to church camp. And the Mormons were a very interesting thing because, like, they were telling me that, like, they believe the gospel of Jesus Christ too, but, like, they believe this, like, extra stuff that's not in the Bible. And then, you know, they spend the whole week trying to convince me to, like, become a Mormon. I was with them for 2 Sundays, actually. I went to church at one church and then went to another Mormon church. They're called wards. The local congregation is called a ward in the Mormon thing. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is what they prefer to be called. Or LDS. And they tried real hard to convince me, and they told me that, like, you know, I need to read the Book of Mormon and pray about it, and, like, God will, like, let me know if it's true and stuff. I think they go into more like, I'll get this feeling, this happy feeling about it. But, like, the basic idea of praying to God to know if it's true, I don't have a problem with that. But, like, Mormons kind of take that a little too far, and they just say if you just feel good about it, you know, that rationally justifies it. Like, that's not, you know, but praying, like, God, if you're there, give me some rational justification, help me find it or something like that. That's different from, like, okay, if I feel good after I pray that, then that just makes it true, you know. Or if I have these good feelings as opposed to those good feelings, well, how do I know those are the good? That's the real test. That doesn't really seem to justify anything. So, like, I got hit with all of that. So there's my own sort of atheism question. There's my uncle that's, like, an agnostic now at Christmas, and then in the summer, there's the LDS trying their best to convert me to this other form of Christianity, you know, questioning and doubting what I've been taught at the church what I've been part of was Southern Baptist Church Camp, Southern Baptist Church. Well, the church I went to the camp with, I was also part of their youth group. Although as we moved forward, I became uninvolved and wasn't going. But certainly throughout my 9th grade year, I think I was still going quite a bit. And in my 10th grade year, still went some. Especially once I got a car, I was going on Sundays, like, a little bit in the morning. And I was going to Sunday school some too. Here's the thing. These questions came up these topics of atheism were talked about quite a bit at the church. And what I got introduced, you know, what was coming to me from the church, from, like, small groups and just in every way, this is what the ideas that, like, permeated the church were what I like to call bad apologetics. Reasons to believe in Christianity that are really bad. And the main one that was front and center, that was just sort of over and over again proclaimed as the great message, you know, was something called fideism. And it was over and over again. I mean, they would straight tell you that if you ask for proof it was a sin for you to ask for proof. It had Bible verses. And it would be like, the Bible says you shouldn't test God, and that means it's a sin for you to ask for proof of God. You're supposed to believe it without proof. That's fideism. You don't really believe it unless you believe it without proof. That's what that makes you a real Christian. That over and over and over and over and over again. Fideism, 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 fideism. You know, Bible verse to back it up. You know, like that you shouldn't test God and you know, just have faith kind of thing. You know, faith is, Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the conviction of what we hope for and the evidence of what we do not see. Believing in things without evidence. You know, the faith is all we need, you know. Which that's not what most people do. Most people believe the gospel based on evidence that they have, which is the testimony of other people, which are generally the best sources of information that they have. That's why most people believe whatever they believe about lots of things. So I was getting that, and then I had some other contact with another church that I'd been to, you know, because of the divorced family thing, you got one church in one town, another church in another town, and in that environment, I actually raised the question, because somebody could tell that I was you know, pondering a little too much, you know, and what's wrong with you, you know? Not that I was really all that upset, but I was like, how do I, you know the Bible's true and all that, you know? And I was given a different bad apologetic. And bad apologetics are very interesting. They were very popular in the church, and the story behind the issue is that was what was being taught in the seminaries in the 70s, and I'm probably in the 80s and before, was really, really bad, illogical, irrational justification for why Christianity's true. Fideism, that's bad. And this other bad apologetic that I got, I'll go ahead and give it to you, was it went like this. Well, no one can disprove God's existence either, because it's impossible to prove that something doesn't exist. And the argument was, you would have to be God to prove that God didn't exist. And so therefore you can't know God doesn't exist. And so you can't ever know atheism is true either. And it's just sort of evening the playing field, so so that you can just believe what you want to believe. Which doesn't actually rationally justify it. And it actually does leave I don't know as a perfectly reasonable option. But the thing was, you know, I immediately I recognized, I was like, do I really want to believe in something if I don't have any reason why I know it's true, you know, to back it up, for no reason at all? According to that argument, it was I should just believe in Christianity for no reason at all, you know, because I can't disprove it either. And the reality is, you could make up an infinity of things like that. You can make up a teapot on Mars that we can't disprove its existence. Are you going to believe in the teapot, you know? Well, it's on equal playing field with rejection of the teapot. I don't know about that, you know. I mean, I could have an infinity of teapots on an infinity of planets that I've postulated could possibly exist, you know. And that's actually an example of bad apologetics. Where does all this bad apologetics come from? It was super popular when I was younger. Well, the problem is that people are learning from parents and teachers who came before them, and those preachers at those churches went to seminaries where that was what was taught to them. And that is not what is taught at seminaries anymore. Seminaries today teach classical Christian apologetics. The long stream of history of Christianity giving evidence for the Christian faith is classical apologetics. But in the 20th century, you had this weird blip where there was this school of thought that was dominant from basically for the first half of the 20th century, from like 1900 to 1955-ish. There was this school of thought called verificationism, and it dominated the universities. And what verificationism said, in a super oversimplified way, but it works for us, was that you can't prove anything true without observable physical evidence. You can't know anything based on just pure logical reasoning. And see, the problem is a lot of the classical apologetics and a lot of the classical arguments in favor of God's existence are based on pure logical reasoning. They're purely philosophical. But verificationism said that, like, you have to observe something. That's the only way to know, is through observation. So, like, verificationism, because it was the dominant idea, there were people who fought against it, Christians who fought against it. But it was such a prevailing idea that at the Christian seminaries, they tried to do apologetics while also accepting verificationism. And that's where you get things like fideism, where it's just like, okay, well, just believe it without evidence. Or that's where you get things like this, well, you can't prove God doesn't exist, because you would have to have all knowledge. Like that, they say the argument like this: you would have to observe everywhere to prove God's non-existence. So you can't prove God's non-existence. So therefore, you're on an equal playing field. Like, that's a verificationist way of reasoning. So what they would do is they would try to do Christian apologetics under verificationism. And so I got hit with a lot of, from the people that I agreed with and believed what they believed, I got hit with a boatload of really, really bad reasons that were hammered out, proclaimed as super awesome. It's like I wasn't even thinking about the question of atheism. At church, they bring it up and talk about how, there's something wrong with somebody who asks for evidence. That's a sinful heart. That's what that is, Now, one of the interesting things is there was one youth event where somebody was doing it, and it was at a weird time where we didn't have a youth minister, and the parents were kind of doing things, and we had a Saturday night kind of time where, and the guy who was leading the service took questions. And so I just straight up asked him, I was like, my uncle is an atheist, and what do I say to that? And he gave the most interesting answer. He said, I don't know. Or I think he just said it like this. He said, that's a tough one. That's tough to deal with. He just said, that's all he said. He didn't give me some really fake answer. He just said, that's tough to deal with. And I really respected that. After all this nonsense from the Mormons and, these bad apologetics, and even the agnostic stuff, he would, because even the agnostic stuff is just oh, I'm agnostic, But, he was just that's tough to deal with. He just I really respected that. Okay, so 1997, the summer of 97 rolls around, and I was now 16, and I went to the church camp again, the same one that I'd been to. It felt like it'd been forever since I'd been there, and it had actually been 2 years since I've been there, because if you miss one camp, then that's actually a 2-year span, because it's 1 year between each camp. So now I was 16. The last time I went to the camp, I was 14. And at this camp, they gave the gospel presentation one night. I think it was a Thursday night. And during that, I just finally came to the decision, and I realized, you know what? I am no longer going to believe in this Christianity stuff until I have a way of actually knowing if it's true or not. I don't know if it's true, and I'm not going to pretend to know that it's true. I don't actually know if it's true. And I remember they said they had the invitation. They were like, well, anyone that has any questions or anything, want to make a decision or whatever, you come down front. and they like massive amounts of people walking down, and like we all like go off to the side, real like push for numbers to come down front, and lots of people go down front. And I remember like seeing all these people, and I was thinking like, okay, all these other people are like going down front to like accept Jesus, and like that's not really what I'm going down there to do. But they said, hey, you can come down here and ask anyone anything, talk about, and like I thought to myself, I was like, whoever they're going to put me with to talk to, because they put you with some kind of counselor person, and I thought like, whoever they're going to put me with is going to be somebody that like I don't know and doesn't know me, and so I can just be super open and honest, and I won't have to hear the nonsense answers that I would get if I asked anyone from my church, or the people that I've asked before. I'll be going to a totally new source of information. And so that's why I went down front. And also because I had made the decision. I made a decision. I was an atheist. I was like, I'm not going to believe this if I don't have a good reason to believe it. I can't. These bad apologetics arguments, like, no, I reject them. I don't actually know if it's true. The way I would have said it at the time is like, I don't actually know if it's true. So like, and you can't really argue with that. It's like, do you know if it's true or not? And your Fideist arguments are all trying to say, well, you don't know it's not true, but like still you don't know if it's true. So you should say, I don't know if it's true. You know what I mean? Which that's called agnosticism. So like the weird thing about all these Fideist arguments that I hear from the church for these people who like believe it is like they're basically saying they don't know if it's true. Because they're telling you that like it's a sin for you to want proof that it's true. And that you have to believe it without proof. Well, what you just told me is that you're an agnostic. That you don't know if it's true. That's what you just said. You just are playing word games at this point. You don't actually know if it's true. You just aren't comfortable with admitting that about yourself. You know what I mean? Like, do you know if it's true? Well, no, I don't actually know if it's true, but I don't know that it's not true, so therefore I'm on equal footing, kind of thing. No. You don't know if it's true, okay? You're an agnostic. So, like, it was like everyone in my church is an agnostic, really. They're just in denial, whereas my uncle was honest about it, and I was just like, I'm not going to believe in it if I don't know if it's true. I want to know if it's true. I wasn't the kind of person who wanted it not to be true. I wasn't that person. That was not me at all. I very much wanted it to be true, but like I absolutely was going to put my foot down and not believe it until I knew it was true. Okay? I couldn't do this anymore. And so I walked down the aisle making my decision. And I made sure that I was the last person in line of all the people. There's like thousands of people in this room. Lots and lots and lots of people walking down front. But I made sure to be the last person in line because I thought, my question is I shouldn't be getting in the way of anyone who like wants to actually, commit their life to Jesus. I should not, be cutting in line, in front of them, So like, I go and I get paired with some youth minister guy. I remember he had a baseball hat on, just some guy, and he's like, asking me what's on my mind, what's going on. And I straight up told him, I was like, I don't actually know if it's true, and I just want to know if it's true or not. Is there proof? Is there some way to like know if it's true? And I looked at the guy, and he like shook his head side to side, and he said, I got nothing for you. He just straight up said, I got nothing for you. Like had his hands up in the air, like, if I remember right, like kind of like sort of like the I don't know sign. I got nothing for you. And so I really respected that because like I've been so annoyed by these people that like, were trying to tell me I was a sinner for like just wanting to know if the gospel's true. What's wrong with me for wanting to know if it's true? It seems like I'm the one who's more interested in it because I want to actually know if it's true. You know what I mean? Like, You keep telling me there's something wrong with me for wanting to know that. It seems like I'm the person who's taking it more seriously here. But like, I just remember like the intense relief I felt that guy was just honest with me. Like, I got nothing for you. You know, like, I was like, thank you. Thank you, sir. An honest human walks this planet after dealing with the Mormons and all this stuff. So like, he said, why don't we pray about it? And I thought to myself, I was like, I got no problem with that. Maybe God does exist. And so I just prayed, God, like, I prayed what's called the Atheist Prayer. Like, if you exist, if you're real, just let me know. I want to know. I actually want to know. I don't want you not to exist. I wasn't one of these people that hated God, but I'm just not going to believe it, if I didn't know if it was true. So, like, I prayed, and walked outside, and then it was weird. Like, all the people from my church were out there. I was like, what are y'all doing out here? And they're like looking at me with like eager expectation for like what on earth is going on with me. And they were like, what decision did you make or whatever? And I was like very awkward, quiet, because I didn't want to say what I really thought, It's like the situation, I was asked to pray at like a wedding shower yesterday. And this is what I was about to pray, because I like to pray what I'm really thinking. And like, this is what I was about to pray. Lord, thank you for the food. Pray that nobody gets COVID, and thank you for so-and-so and so-and-so that people get married, I was about to say that, and I like stopped myself, because like, you don't really need to ruin the atmosphere of people having fun, having a good time, So the whole pray that nobody gets COVID part, I like awkwardly, I was like, whoa, it was like very awkward, And this was one of those moments, like, I was like, and I looked at the youth minister guy, whoever he was, and he had that knowing look. It was like, we like connected, it was like, yeah, I don't, or whatever. And then like, I was like, very, very much struggling with what am I going to say to these people. And then some person who worked at the camp comes running out of left field, or left stage left or whatever, I don't know, with like a little card, like an index card, like a little card thing. But it had stuff on it. Like I had to fill out a card explaining what decision I made for their records. And I would just remember thinking like, oh, thank goodness. I'll just fill out this card and it'll give me a little bit of time to think of something to say. And like I was filling out the card. And it got to like, check the box for what decision you made. And I read the one about rededicating your life. And something happened when I read those words. And it wasn't really in those words, but something happened when I read those words. And I don't know how to explain it. But somehow at that point, I knew for a fact it was true. And ever since then, I've always known that it was true. And I just knew it. It was just somehow, like, it's kind of like you can know things without being able to like explain how you know them. We'll get more into that as we go, but like the bottom line is, I was certain, 100%. I knew that I knew that I knew that I knew that was true. And I was just so excited that I knew it was true that like one of the other kids that was there with me, he's one grade above me. I was just so happy, and like I just gave him a big hug, and I just gave everybody a big hug. And I was just like, that was it. And I was so excited. And I remember in the class time the next day, they were like, what do y'all got anything to say? And I was like, I just remember I in front of them, like, it's a big class of people I didn't know. I just said, I know I'm going to heaven when I die. And like, for the first time, it was like I wasn't fibbing, or like I know, I don't care like who looks at me and calls me a kook. I know, you know what I mean. So then I moved into like my junior year and senior year, where I remember I had a friend. I was really into skateboarding at the time, and I remember, especially in my junior year, my other friends kind of quit skateboarding, and like this one friend kind of picked it up when they quit, and so like it was like I had these two friends in my sophomore year, and then in my junior year it was like this one friend, and then in my senior year that friend had quit, and they like built like a DIY skate park in my town, and I skated there. Basically starting at like May at the end of my junior year. But like during the school year of like my junior year, I skated with this one guy, and I remember he pushed this idea on me that like nobody really knows anything at all, because there's no way to prove anything. There's no way to prove anything at all. There is no such thing as proof. How, and like I didn't really have a good response to him that night. I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, well, if that's true, then like, you couldn't know that like God, you couldn't believe in God. And he just kept saying, well, no one can really prove anything at all. And his thing was like, he had a mom that was like real strict, and he was saying that like it bothers him when she punishes him, but it shouldn't bother him when she punishes him, because how does he know that the punishment exists? How does he really know? Because it could be an illusion, and like, how do you really prove anything, really? It's possible for you to be mistaken, so how do you really know anything? And the thing here's the thing for me, and the decision, I kind of took that idea in, which is called skepticism in philosophical terms. You can't really know anything. That's called elementary skepticism, which is slightly different from I can't think of the word for like the more advanced form of skepticism. It's bothering me now that I can't remember it. But it's not important for us because we're just sticking with elementary skepticism. The thing was, I knew for a fact that Christianity was true. Now, I had another friend who was like always in church all the time, and he was always trying to get me to like go to like as many youth group related things as possible. And at one point, he got me to go on like Saturday to some youth group thing in like the next county over, where there was this youth minister, and he preached from like Romans 7 and 8. And I just remember the way this youth minister over there preached from the Bible was like totally different from anything I'd ever seen before. He was really trying to dig into what it said and figure out what it really meant. And like, he wasn't taking stuff. What I was used to was people really trying to study the Bible. I was used to people studying it and really trying to break it down, but I wasn't used to this whole like, let's just wipe the table clean of stuff that we want it to mean, and just look at it and try to figure out what the guy who wrote it is really trying to say, and really understand what he's saying there. And that was a unique new thing for me. And so I developed this idea that like, you really can know what the Bible is really talking about. So there's a lot of stuff in there that comes across as kind of mysterious and weird. So like, here I was as a senior in high school, and we move into my freshman year of college, and I had these three things. On the one hand, I knew that Christianity is true. But on the other hand, I accepted that like, how do I actually prove anything true? I wasn't sure of any way at all to do that. I couldn't think of anything. I couldn't come up with anything. But I knew that Christianity was true, but I also accepted that, like, you can't prove anything. Because I couldn't come up with a way really to prove anything where I couldn't also see, like, some way to doubt it. And then at the same time, I was also on this other kick of, like, wanting to actually understand what the Bible really says. You know, what does it say in there? What does it really say? What is it saying? Not what does it, affirm that I already believe. But, like, just what is it saying? And so I came to the decision that, like, accepting that, like, there's no such thing as proof, basically, of anything ever. But at the same time, I knew that Christianity was true. But I couldn't prove it. But then I said, well, there's no such thing as proof of anything ever. So, like, why should I bother trying to prove it? I shouldn't have to prove it because I can't. No one ever can prove anything. And so then we move into, like, my freshman year of college. So this would be the 1999/2000 school year. And at this point, I start going to, like, some, like, I guess college ministry type stuff on extra nights out of the week. I went to this thing called BSU, it's called Baptist Student Union. It was on Tuesday nights. And I went to that. Later that summer, the summer of 2000, all of my college friends went and volunteered as youth workers at a different youth camp. And when they came back, they decided to start a small group Bible study in their house, their, like, new house that they had all ended up renting together. So that summer, between, my first year of college and my second year of college, the summer of 2000, they start renting this house. And they start this small group Bible study, and I start going. And before long, there was an associate pastor of the church who was, like, leading the Bible study. But before long, he stepped back and let the college students, let us do it. And it kind of fell apart. No one was prepared with anything, and it was just sort of fell apart. And then I said, what we should do is set up a rotation where each one person prepares every time, so that we have, because a lot of people were showing up for it, and then all of a sudden it just fell apart. And it was very awkward because all these people were showing up at the house. And it wasn't my house, but it was, like, my friend's house, and I was there all the time. But it was very awkward for all these people to show up, and there's, like, no Bible study. And it's just kind of hanging out in a house. So, one of my friends there said, sounds like Ben's volunteering to lead. I was like, okay, I'll lead. And then I led the Bible study, and I was doing my best to, like, teach from the Bible. And see, the whole time since I've become a Christian, I'd always read my Bible regularly. I think by this point in my life, I'd finally read it all the way through. When I was younger, I was someone who thought church was something that was just created to interrupt cartoons. But once I became a Christian, I remember that first Sunday after I become a Christian, I wanted to put my pants on as fast as possible so that I could get to church as fast as possible. Because I wanted to go to church. I remember putting my pants on in a hurry. So, like, get your britches on, son. So, here we are. Ben himself had come up with his own bad apologetics, his bad solutions to his confusions. But I was at this Bible study, and over time, this Bible study continued for years. And we move forward, and I'm trying to remember when this was. I start helping out with youth ministry, and I end up leading this Bible study a lot of the time, and I was obsessed with the idea that, like, we can know what the Bible says, which I know that there's all kinds of conflict with the other things I believed, but, like, that's I'm just giving you the reality of the mixture of confusion that was me, you know. Okay. I started helping out with youth ministry. I had one friend, he was youth minister of one church, and another friend who was youth minister of another church, two really small churches, and they both were my age, and they both were the youth ministers of the churches, and they both came to the Bible study. And then, like, we would go to, I would go help out. One of them, the youth group, met on Sunday night, and one of them met on Wednesday night. And so I guess after I started leading the Bible study, everyone said I should come and help out at the camp. So in the summer of 2001, I came and started helping out at the camp. And then after that, I started helping out with doing youth ministry. That was my first youth ministry. And so over time, I began to develop, relationships with these kids. And some of the teenagers would be looking for something to do on a Friday night or something like that. And I remember at some point I was at one of my friend's house, and I don't know if we were still doing the Bible study at this point. This was when I had gone off to another school. I remember clearly this was before, this would have been in 2003 at some point. And it was probably the summer of 2003, honestly. But like, we were over there, and like, one of my friends who had been part of the Bible study and was helping, we were at a different friend's house, but like, he had rented a video game, and then he had his kid over because they were going to play the video game. And then like, another kid who was one of the youth was just like over there because he wanted something to do, so he was coming over and hanging out. And I remember he raised the question of like, how do you know Christianity is true? And like, it was weird because like, all of a sudden I was doing youth ministry on like a Saturday night while we were just kind of chilling out at the house, and like, my two friends were playing this basketball video game. And so we wind up having this like, philosophical conversation / theology conversation. So we're talking about theology and philosophy, epistemology technically at the same time, and I think we'd been talking about some moral stuff too. And but my other two friends are in the same room, but they're playing video games and talking about that, and it's gotten kind of quiet, and we're just sitting there, and I think the youth that asked me the question was sitting on the floor. And like, I was sitting on the couch. And he asked me that, and so I just spit out loud to him very confidently, well, there's no such thing as proof, so it's okay for you to not prove it. But you can still, like, believe it without proving it, because there's no point in proving it because you can't prove anything. I see all of this, like, had been purely internal for me. I hadn't discussed this with anyone else. It was just me listening to what people say and then judging it, and I spit this out, and then one of my friends who was across the room in a recliner had just been reading a Ravi Zacharias book about Christian apologetics, and I didn't know that there was really any such thing as like serious Christian apologetics. And he immediately recognized that, like, what I just said, there's no such thing as proof, that's self-contradictory. Now, this friend of mine was someone that had been, one of my best friends, all through high school and stuff, and he went to the Bible study, but we had never talked about these philosophical questions. I just considered them on my own. I didn't really talk about that stuff with people too much. The one friend who in my driveway when we were skating had brought it up. He was someone who would say that kind of thing all the time, but that was sort of a rare type of conversation. But as far as in Bible study, we just talked about the Bible. We didn't talk about rational justification for the truth of the Bible or anything that it says. And this friend of mine immediately recognized that when I say there's no such thing as proof, that is a formal logical fallacy. He didn't say it that way, but he recognized that it's self-contradictory. How do I know that it is true that there's no such thing as proof? In other words, if I say that I can't know anything, then how can I know that I can't know anything? This is the self-defeating nature of elementary skepticism, of basic skepticism. You can't actually know that you can't know anything, because if you did, then you would know that you can't know anything, and therefore it's logically impossible. And this concept blew my mind, because a few things I realized very quickly. I wanted to argue with him because this was an idea that had formed in my mind and I put a lot of thought into for years. Basically 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003. Here I am doing youth ministry. We've been doing Bible study together for years. Going to the BSU, and I'd even gone to the Wesley House too. Some. And I've thought about this a lot, and then in 2 seconds he's able to shoot down what I had to say. Because Ravi Zacharias, especially in those books, would always bring up the law of non-contradiction. Now, Ravi Zacharias has been revealed to be not a very much a bad guy. And I came to understand he's not really a great Christian apologist. But pointing out the self-contradictory nature of me saying there's no such thing as proof is actually low-hanging fruit in Christian apologetics. That's an easy basket. That's an easy one. That's a softball. That's an easy pitch right down the middle, lobbed in, that you can knock out of the park, no problem. So you can get that from Ravi Zacharias' book, you know what I mean? But the interesting thing was that this whole world of real Christian apologetics, everything I'd heard about Christian apologetics wasn't coming from a book. It was just word of mouth things that people picked up from one person to another. This fideism thing, and this can't disprove God, so and then the stuff I thought about on my own, it was just blowing my mind that there's people out there that actually think about this stuff other than me and take it seriously. And so I was. And the other thing, there were so many things that blew my mind. I also recognized there was a twofold nature. I knew that my friend was absolutely 100% correct. And he was right. And it didn't matter that I disagreed with him. He's right. It did, there was no way for me to poke a hole in what he said. He knew he was right. He had real, rationally justified knowledge. You know what I mean? He really knew it. That when I say that there's impossible to know anything, okay. I also recognized that I seriously wanted to disagree with him. And I could have, but I held back because it was no, he's right. And I realized in that instant that just because somebody proves something beyond the shadow of a doubt, it doesn't mean that you have to believe it. Because here he was proving something beyond the shadow of a doubt. And yet, I didn't have to believe it. I chose to believe it. I was just directly aware of that. And so then, this was my introduction to real Christian apologetics. As it, this is 2003, and I'm okay, I've got to get into this. I've got to learn more about this. Where did you pick this up? And he's like, Ravi Zacharias book. And I'm like, I've got to get all these Ravi Zacharias books and read them. And this is before you really like listen to long podcasts and download, audio stuff to listen to. That came along very shortly later, but in 2003 you're a little too early for that. But I begin to learn good arguments. I begin to learn good Christian apologetics, and I have to study because some of these arguments, take time to really comprehend. But the weird thing that it comes to is at this point in my life, and for a long time now, after studying these arguments, I have a new problem, and it's very different from my old problem. My new problem is everything's too obvious. You know what I mean? Like, you would have to be crazy not to believe in God. And so I have a very, very hard time doing, I have to work really hard, I guess, to be tender and gentle and really try to understand someone that, like, doesn't think God exists or doubts it. It's at a point where, like, that seems crazy to me. Like you've lost all your marbles, like, what? Like, what? Like, and it's weird because that was once me. And I remember what it was like for that to be me, but, like, at this point, knowing what I know about these proofs and these evidences and these good sound arguments for God's existence, on pain of irrationality is how you deny God's existence. And that always seemed like the hardest thing to prove of all, And now, of all the things Christians believe, that is by far the easiest to prove. So, like, that's where we're at now, I guess, with me and my story. One of the things that I like to do is do my best to make things accessible to people, to say them in a way that's where anyone can understand it. What I find is the best philosophy tends to be done slowly. It's not always something you can do quickly. So a person has to be willing to put in the time and, like, sort of agonize over the ideas. And once you get it, it's like if someone tells me that God doesn't exist, they might as well have told me that 2 plus 2 makes 1,059. It's like, good for you that you think that. I guess, like, I love the pep in your step, but, like, okay. Crazy guy goes on walking down the road. Yeah, it's like, So, that's where we're at. That is the real story of me, and my journey into Christian apologetics. And those are the real things that I encountered. That's really how it happened. That's not trying to make it more dramatic or less dramatic. That's just what happened. That's how I am where I am with what I do. Most people are into Christian apologetics. For most people, the testimony thing works for them. And what research has shown is that, like, while people are converted because of testimony, after they're converted, they begin to see that, like, the world makes sense when they view it through the lens of their new religion. They're like, yeah, this kind of fits with everything. There's nothing that's, like, out of place. Because that would be a problem if there was something that, like if the Bible said there's no such thing as birds, then that would be, that wouldn't fit with what, if you tried to view the world through that lens, you'd see birds all the time and it wouldn't make sense. It'd be a crack in the lens. But, like, if you don't have those types of problems with a biblical worldview. And the bird example is kind of silly, but, like, there's other things you could think about where it's like, okay, what about this? What about this? So it has this sense of fit that becomes a rational justification for people, and it's a good one. Does it prove it beyond the shadow of a doubt? No, but that's a good one. And then, like, there's also most people recognize the moral quality, the high virtuous moral quality of the Bible and of Christianity, And then that becomes a good justification too, because that means that like whoever produced this was a good person and probably wouldn't lie to you. You recognize like I now have more admiration and respect and trust for whoever produced this. Research shows that's what most people do. That becomes most people's rational justification. So they say things like, I just need the Bible. That's not irrational. They're not really spelling it out, maybe, but once you dig into it and start asking them questions, it becomes like clear, like that's what they mean. Now, when I talk about philosophical arguments or like classical Christian apologetics, those are like other things that we talk about on this channel and, you know, in all sorts of other places across the world. There are videos and things galore for you to see that do good Christian apologetics. And like my point is, that stuff's even more, that's a stronger, much stronger rational justification. And that brings you to the point where you're like me, where like you're scratching your head in disbelief that anyone would not believe in God. Like, are you, huh? What? Are you, do you need to go to the doctor? You know, it's like, you know, and I have to work real hard to, you know, to not think that way. And I have to make sure I don't think that way. But that's where we're at now. And with that, I've said all the things I think really that I should say, that I need to say. So, thank you for patiently listening along. Have a lovely day.